Hi, thank you for having me. I'm Francesca Capone, and I'm grateful to Adele Berdassi for inviting me to be here with all of you. I'm from New York, and I'm currently based in Portland, Oregon, and my work is primarily concerned with the creation of materials and a poetic consideration of their meaning. I'm interested in how tactile forms simultaneously serve as functional surfaces for daily life and as a mode of communication or symbol within the cultural paradigm. So I'll begin by addressing my occupation as an introduction to my approach to interdisciplinary work. I'm a materials designer, an artist, a poet, and an educator, and I committed to pursuing all of these interests at the beginning of my career, but couldn't visualize how they might all fit together simultaneously. While engaging in these practices with any kind of depth, to hone a craft takes time, focus, and commitment. And my approach to my interdisciplinary practice has been through braiding. So this is a rotation of focuses where one takes precedence at a time and the pattern repeats. Maybe you've heard of parallel practices. This is a more complex approach to that. Perhaps not in an exact order, but in a cumulative way. So everything that I've accomplished has been established over a longer period of time with various rotations of each particular focus. And this approach does take more time to gain traction, and so patience and endurance have been necessary. I first came to know the idea of textile poetics from this family heirloom sampler of the Italian alphabet, which took a prominent space on the wall of my childhood home. And perhaps is a good transition to the next panel. I'm going to focus on sharing with you a project that is celebrating its 10-year anniversary called Weaving Language. And my early inspiration for weaving language came to me while studying these two books in 2012 during a residency at the Haystack Mountain School of Crafts that I did with the artist and poet Jen Bervin. So I was admiring Ani Alber's catalog of all the various structures and qualities of weaving, as well as Emmett Williams' work in compiling and translating a global movement in concrete poetry. And I wondered if one could translate the properties of weaving into English with a similar approach. Note the translation of words at the top right from German to English. The poem itself is visual and it only works in German. So only a few words are learned by the reader and then a visual poem unlocks. Directly referencing Emmett Williams' translation technique with a tower of equal signs, I mapped Ani Alber's properties of weaving language onto English grammar. And I'll explain more about this a little later. So this is the first edition of Weaving Language One Lexicon from 2012, which was published in an edition of 100. And in this book, weaving processes are juxtaposed with English grammar to suggest a method for reading woven works. Offering visual vocabularies as both discrete concrete poems, as well as a collection of translatable terms, this book invites writers and weavers to participate by considering weaving as a form that may be read and perhaps translated. So there are many versions of this project, and it has evolved over time and existed within collaborations, exhibitions, lectures, readings, as well as the book form. Here I am in Leipzig, Germany, presenting the first edition at the initiative Wort und Bild. While researching the intersection of weaving and writing, I discovered that there were many disparate references, but never one that fully captured the intersection of these forms. So I've created the Weaving Language series to draw attention to the critical mass of existing work at the intersection of text and textile, predating even our earliest writing systems, by cataloging much of it and advocating for its relevancy as an overlooked language of marginalized people, and designing prompts for readerly and weaverly exploration, bringing this intersection to life through facilitating contemporary dialogue with various weavers and writers, as well as striving to keep the language alive, as language is most vibrant and alive through its usage amongst a community, which is a beautiful connection to the previous lecture. So here are a few more images and videos of the world of all the many additions and collaborations, which I'm just going to flip through. This is a quick snippet from Writing in Threads. That was Ian Hatcher, the poet. This was at the visual art exhibition associated with Writing in Threads. And then the second book, or the Languages, Image, Paper, Code, and Cloth, which came out through Information as Material in 2018. Languages, Image, Paper, Code, and Cloth connects all of global movement in interdisciplinary weaving and writing, looking at all the different ways and words in which poetics of weaving and writing overlap. So this is just an example of Latin, Greek, Sanskrit, Farsi, and Mayan, and how the words text and textile connect in all of these various languages. And a history of material writing. I'm going to skip through. Bustrafidon. So this book, I won't go into depth on it, but I'll just read a couple of snips from it. Languages, image, paper, code, and cloth, a spliced rope, numerous cords integrally connected to one another, forming invisible and almost seamless connections. Materials are gathered, spun into a line that can be followed, read, touched, and understood. No, not, node, note, notation. Reed, thread, stitch, stitch, script. Song, harp, warp, word. And there are a few codes that I explored with translating weaving into writing and vice versa. This looks at poetic forms, and then had the fortune of the artist Audra Wheelawek translating it into a script.
Because she weaves, and that is precious, so well that now be star of reflection shade.
So she took, or the Sestina poetic form was taken into a woven form through a repeating pattern, and then observed as a poetic form, and then translated back into a poetic form by Audra. Oops. This is at the reading we did at the 2018 Printed Matter Art Book Fair. So this is the 2015 edition of Weaving Language 1 Lexicon, which is the book that I'll mostly focus on today. And that Tower of Equal Signs, which I'll go into depth in a moment. Some words associated with the color silver. So an expanded trade edition of Weaving Language 1 Lexicon was released last fall, 2022. So I share all the different editions just to show that languages, this work, true to language, has evolved over time, and the language has changed over time. So an expanded trade edition of Weaving Language 1 Lexicon came out through Essay Press with support from the Oregon Arts Commission and the Ford Family Foundation. And a group of weavers was brought into dialogue with the original text, which brought added depth and dimension and kept the language alive. So you can see the contributors were Amrin Forsuk, Adjoagarji Nzinga Greaves, Amani Elizabeth Jackson, Allison Parrish, Kit Schluter, Martha Tuttle, and Sarah Zapata, with diagrams from Ani Albers and Raul de Harcourt. So I'll just read, the book begins with a manifesto, which I'll just read from, which is calling all language shapers to support identifying weaving as a form of writing and naming the process of which I call weave writing. Extracting word from weave, the gesture of attempt as a poem with grammar as an outline, informed, intuited, interpreted, extrapolating material from material, a code embedded in a surface, follow line of thread towards textual interlacing, a visual interlacing, a readerly experience, a reading prompt, a passage revealed through the process of making. So the book begins with that same Tower of Equal Signs inspired by Emmett Williams and Ani Albers. And this latest edition uses the table of contents from the original manuscript of the lexicon as a framework and brings artists and writers into dialogue with each unique section. So the fiber indicates the pronoun. It is the subject, the content, the who in the work. And I invited Martha Tuttle, who elaborates on the complications of pronouns and fiber. For instance, fibers that we associate as natural can be chemically manipulated in its processing. Weave structure is the verb because it is an action, and Alison Paris uses complex logical systems that walk through how computer coding languages can generate weave structures from English verbs. Interlacing in tapestry are prepositions, and Sarah Zapata poetically extrapolates on this subject. Diagrams here are by Ani Albers and Raoul de Harcourt, and I'll read briefly from Sarah. Yarn is the ultimate preposition. It has the potential to become many different types of cloths or surfaces depending upon how the hand handles the material. The yarn governs what is to be done and how, dictating how the material relates to the machinery or the hand. So the color represents nouns and adjectives, as it holds so much of the actual meaning of a woven work. For this new edition, I worked with collaborators Amaranth Borsak, Adjoa Gargi, Nzinga Greaves, and Imani Elizabeth Jackson to edit and reshape these colors rendered in language. So what's pictured here is the list or compilation of words that I associated with blue. And this is from the 2015 edition, excuse me. And this was in 2014, I began the process of parsing the dictionary into colors while artist in residence at the Joseph and Ani Albers Foundation. And this list is an example of the various words that to me represented blue, and a similar list was compiled for every color. In the 2022 edition, Adjoa, Amaranth, and Imani transformed these original lists, adding to and editing them with their points of view. And of course, language exists between people. It only becomes more relevant, broader, more representative when representing a broad variety of points of view. I only wish this could be compiled by an even broader group. It would take longer. But the work opens up as an invitation to anyone who wants to participate. So it's never in a state of being finished, as language never really is. And there's this note here that I think helps clarify that, which says, attempting a linguistic association for color is a subjective pursuit. Time, place, and context are a few things that can affect the meaning of a color. And these lists are wholly imperfect, not exhaustive, and contain many hypocrisies and repetitions. They are malleable for redefinition as per each individual's perspective and relative usage. So a few words from blue: Pacific, expansive, buoyant, dorsal, wanderer, windward. And from yellow, maize, thrush, higher, kayak, plantain, obscene, hassle, gregarious. From red, enthusiasm, sensuous, love, impact, sensation, grenadine, ravage, blockade, sled. My favorite part of what the three poets added to the project was iridescent, which includes words that read as more than one color. So examples are bright, fantasy, firework, illumination, eruption, oblivious delight. This was at the New York Printed Matter Art Book Fair in 2012, where the book first entered the world. And here's a quick clip of Amaranth reading. That was at our book launch at National in Portland, Oregon. And a few more images of our reading with Martha, Allison, Amaranth, and Imani. There's Martha. And Allison is at the conference, I think, this week too. Amaranth, who is also here this week. And Imani. So many of the editions that I've shared with you today of Weaving Language are now out of print. However, I'm excited to share that these new editions with Essay Press will remain in print, so that is how they can be discovered. And the work is intended to invite the reader to view Textile as text. So I want to invite all of you to participate in this prompt. Use Textile as a prompt and consider it as something that can be read and responded to. Think of your task as weaving language in some way, and let the translation system from the book and a textile of your choosing be your guide to unlock a new approach in thinking and writing. This is an opportunity to work ekphrastically. How can you translate or map the woven structure and image into written form? Use the experiment in a way that makes sense for you, and let the rules be a starting point that you can branch out from into new experimental spaces. Don't let them bind you. Work in collaboration with a group. Each person could create a short piece of woven language and collaborate by patching these short pieces together into a cento, which is a patchwork poem made from disparate parts combined. Thank you all so much.
Wow, that was great. Thank you so much, Francesca.